He lived a quiet life that few people noticed. Every morning he woke up before the sun, not because he enjoyed it, but because life had trained him that way. Work came first, feelings later. His small apartment always looked the same, clean but empty, like no one truly lived there. Photos stayed in drawers, not on walls. Memories were easier to handle when they were hidden. People around him thought he was doing fine. He smiled at the right moments, showed up on time, and never complained. But inside there was a weight he never spoke about. Years earlier, he had believed in love with his whole heart. When it ended, it did not break loudly. It faded slowly, leaving behind doubt and silence. Since then, he had learned to expect less. She lived only a few miles away, yet her world felt completely different. Her days were full, sometimes too full. She balanced work, family, and responsibilities that never seemed to end. She was known as someone strong, someone dependable. When problems came, people called her first. She handled everything with calm words and steady hands. What people did not see was how tired she felt at night. When the noise of the day finally stopped, she sat alone with her thoughts. She had once dreamed of a love that felt safe and warm. Instead, she had learned to build her own strength. Trust did not come easily anymore, but the hope never fully left. Their lives moved forward without knowing the other existed. Days passed, seasons changed, and the idea of meeting someone special felt distant for both of them. Love was something they believed happened to other people, not to them. The first time they crossed paths was ordinary. There was nothing dramatic about it. No music, no slow-motion moment. Just a normal day that almost went unnoticed. A small delay at a familiar place pushed their routines out of order. If either of them had arrived a few minutes earlier or later, they would have missed each other completely. They stood near each other without speaking at first. The space was crowded, and everyone looked impatient. He noticed her because she seemed calm, while others were restless. She noticed him because he stepped aside to let someone pass, a small gesture most people ignored. Their eyes met for a second, then looked away. It should have ended there, but something made him speak. It was not planned. A simple comment about the weight said without thinking. She answered with a light smile and a short reply. Nothing clever. Nothing impressive. Just words shared between two strangers. The conversation stayed small, but it felt easy. There was no pressure to impress, no need to pretend. They spoke about simple things, the kind of things people talk about when they do not expect anything more. When it was time to leave, they nodded politely and went their separate ways. He walked away thinking it was nothing. She did the same, yet later that day. Both found their thoughts returning to that brief moment. Not because it was exciting, but because it felt calm. Familiar in a strange way. Like a quiet pause in a busy world, the next meeting happened by chance again. This time, recognition came with a soft smile. A few more words were exchanged. They learned small details about each other without trying. Where they worked, what they liked to do when they had free time. What made their days harder than they needed to be? There was no rush, no deep confessions, just comfort. Days turned into weeks, and chance meetings slowly became expected. They did not call it anything. They did not label it. It was just two people who found ease in each other's presence. When one did not show up, the other noticed. Friends began to comment. Light jokes, curious looks. He brushed them off. She changed the subject. Both were careful. Experience had taught them that hope could be dangerous. Still, something was changing. He found himself paying more attention to his surroundings, wondering if he might see her. She caught herself smiling at messages that meant nothing more than a simple greeting. These small changes scared them more than they admitted. One evening, after a long day, she almost canceled plans to meet him. She told herself it was just exhaustion. But deep down, it was fear. The kind that comes when something starts to matter. She went anyway. They sat across from each other in a quiet place, talking about their days. At some point, the conversation slowed. Not in an awkward way, but in a thoughtful one. There was a moment when silence settled between them. Neither felt the need to break it. That was when she realized something important. she felt safe. He felt it too, though he did not have the words for it yet. Being with her did not feel like effort. It felt like rest. As the night ended, they stood outside, unsure how to say goodbye. There was no promise made, no future discussed, just a shared understanding that something had begun. Even if neither knew what it would become, they walked away again, separate paths under the same sky. But this time, it was different. The quiet of their lives no longer felt so heavy. Somewhere between routine and chance, a door had opened. Neither of them knew it yet. But this simple beginning would soon change everything, and the love story everyone would one day talk about had already started. Quietly, without anyone noticing, life moved on. But neither of them could forget the quiet moments they had shared. It was strange how someone could appear in a world so ordinary and make it feel different. The more they met, the more they realized that the small, everyday things mattered more than grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Their conversations became longer, and laughter started to find its way into their meetings. It was still simple, still natural, but it carried a weight neither had expected. They spoke about their lives, about work, about things that seemed mundane at first. But in those words, they began to understand each other, piece by piece. He learned about her fears and the responsibilities she carried alone. She learned about the silent struggles he faced every day. There was no judgment, no need to explain too much. They listened, really listened, and found comfort in each other's presence. It was a slow kind of closeness. It's the kind that grows without notice, but builds a strong foundation. Even with this growing connection, there were doubts. Both had loved and lost, and both knew how easily hope could turn into disappointment. They hesitated, choosing caution over passion. It was safer to remain careful than to risk being hurt again. Yet every meeting chipped away at that caution. The more they shared, the harder it became to ignore the pull they felt toward each other. Friends and family began to notice subtle changes. He smiled more easily, lighter than before, and often seemed distracted, caught up in thoughts of her. She seemed more relaxed around people, calmer in ways that surprised even herself. Yet they both kept it quiet, afraid that speaking too loudly about their connection might break it. One afternoon, they found themselves walking through a park they had often passed but never explored together. The sun was soft, casting long shadows on the path. They talked about trivial things, colors, weather, memories from childhood, but even these small conversations deepened their bond. It was in these simple exchanges that trust began to take root. He noticed how she listened carefully, how her eyes followed the story he told without interruption, without impatience. It made him feel valued, seen in a way he had forgotten existed. She noticed how he seemed to understand without asking too many questions, how he could sense when something was bothering her. It was subtle, almost invisible, but undeniable. One evening, after weeks of growing closeness, they found themselves sitting together in a quiet cafe. Neither had planned the meeting. It happened as it often did, by chance. But this time, the conversation felt heavier, more meaningful. They shared stories from their past, the moments that had shaped them, the experiences that had left scars. They spoke carefully, as if testing the waters, and found comfort in each other's honesty. As the night wore on, the air between them shifted. The laughter was still there, but beneath it was a sense of understanding that words could not capture. There was a pause, a quiet moment when they looked at each other and felt the weight of unspoken feelings. Neither spoke first, both afraid to break the fragile connection with the wrong words. Yet in that silence, they both realized something important. They were not alone anymore. There was someone who saw them, truly saw them, without judgment or expectation. It was a revelation, and it scared them as much as it comforted them. Life outside these moments continued, full of responsibilities and challenges. Work was demanding, family matters required attention, and old fears lingered at the edges of their minds. But the thought of each other became a source of strength. Messages, brief meetings, and stolen moments became lifelines. Small reminders that they were not facing the world alone. They began to share more personal details, little by little, revealing pieces of themselves that had been hidden. He spoke of his dreams, not the ones he had achieved, but the ones he still hoped for. She spoke of her fears, the quiet anxieties that kept her awake at night. In doing so, they built a bridge of understanding and empathy. But life tested them. One day, an unexpected problem arose in her family, demanding her full attention. He tried to be supportive, offering words and gestures that could not fix the situation but showed he cared. She appreciated it, but the stress and pressure reminded them both that love was not simple. It required patience and resilience. They learned to navigate these challenges together, slowly discovering that closeness was more than shared laughter. It was being present in difficult times, offering comfort without judgment, listening without interruption, and caring without expectation. This was new for both of them, and it strengthened the connection that had begun so quietly. As weeks turned into months, their relationship grew deeper. It was no longer just chance meetings. They started to plan small things together, aware of each other's routines and needs. A shared coffee in the morning, a brief walk in the evening, small acts that spoke louder than words. These moments became anchors. Grounding them in a connection that felt increasingly essential, they also began to see each other outside the comfort of familiar places. Trips to new locations, visits to friends' gatherings, even mundane errands became opportunities to be together. The world, once a place of routine and solitude, started to feel more alive and welcoming when they were side by side. Yet fear remained. Both knew how easily life could change, how fragile trust could be. They hesitated to speak of the future, unsure if it was too soon, afraid that acknowledging the depth of their feelings might push one away. It was a delicate balance, walking the line between hope and caution, between longing and restraint. One evening, after a long day, they sat on a park bench under a sky painted with the colors of sunset. Words were few. The silence was filled with understanding, with the quiet comfort of being present without needing to fill every moment. It was in these simple, unspoken moments that they realized the significance of what was happening between them. The bond was no longer casual, no longer fleeting. It was growing into something that mattered, something worth protecting. He looked at her and felt a warmth he had not experienced in years. She looked at him and felt a sense of relief and peace, as if the weight of solitude had been lifted. They did not speak of love yet. They did not define it. They both knew, quietly and undeniably, that their lives had begun to intertwine in a way that could not be undone. And so, their story unfolded not with dramatic declarations or sudden revelations, but with quiet understanding, gentle trust, and the slow, steady growth of a connection that promised something rare and precious. Life would continue to test them. Challenges would arise, and fears would surface, but they had begun to find strength in each other. They had started to build a bond that could carry them through the uncertainty. A love that was slowly, carefully becoming real. Life has a way of testing people, even when things seem calm. For them, this was true. The quiet closeness they had built over weeks and months suddenly felt more fragile. A single event shifted the balance, making them see their feelings clearly for the first time. It was not a dramatic accident, not a loud confrontation, but something smaller, yet powerful enough to reveal the depth of their emotions. She received unexpected news that required her immediate attention. It was personal, delicate, and heavy. She had to make decisions quickly, and for the first time she realized she could not face it alone. She reached out to him, not because she was sure he could fix it, but because she trusted him. Trusted that he would listen, that he would understand without needing explanations or judgment. He arrived quickly, aware that her world was suddenly heavier. He stayed close, offering support in ways that were quiet but meaningful. He did not try to solve the problem entirely. He offered presence, patience, and reassurance. He listened to her fears, held space for her doubts, and shared words that made the load feel lighter, if only a little. His support was steady, calm, and genuine. During that moment, something changed. They both realized how important the other had become. It was not just comfort or friendship anymore. It was a connection that had grown too strong to ignore, bond that brought safety, warmth, and a sense of belonging. They could not deny that their feelings had shifted. that the line between friendship and something deeper was no longer clear. The following days were filled with reflection. Each of them thought about what had happened, what it meant, and what they truly wanted. They had both been cautious before, careful to not speak too loudly or too quickly about emotions they were still figuring out, but the event had forced honesty. The unspoken became clear. They were more than friends, and the connection could not be ignored. They met again, this time with an awareness that the dynamic had changed. The conversations carried more weight. Words were chosen with care, but there was also a newfound ease. Was still present, but now there was a deeper undertone, an understanding that life had become richer when shared together. He realized how much he had missed having someone truly present in his life. Someone who could see beyond the surface, beyond routine, to the person beneath. She realized how much she had longed for a partner who could offer support without asking. For perfection, someone who could share burdens without judgment. One evening, they walked along a quiet street, the lights reflecting softly on the pavement. They spoke of ordinary things, but with a closeness that made every word feel significant. At a certain point, the conversation slowed, and they simply walked side by side. Words were unnecessary. The silence itself spoke volumes, a testament to how well they understood each other. In that silence, they both felt the turning point. It was not sudden or dramatic, but quiet and undeniable. Each knew that feelings had deepened, that the connection they shared was no longer casual. There was a choice to be made: to ignore it and risk regret, or to acknowledge it and embrace the uncertainty that came with honesty. They chose honesty. It was not a grand declaration, not a dramatic moment. It was a conversation, simple and sincere. They admitted that their feelings had grown beyond friendship, that they valued each other more than they had realized. There was relief in speaking aloud what had been silently felt for weeks, a mixture of nervousness and hope. From that point on, their interactions changed subtly. Small gestures carried more meaning. A hand lightly brushing, a smile that lingered, messages that conveyed more than words. They began to see the world differently, through a lens that included the other person in every thought, every plan, every quiet moment. Life continued with its challenges. Work, family responsibilities, and personal fears did not vanish. But the support they offered each other made difficulties easier to bear. The bond they had built became a source of strength, a foundation upon which trust and love could grow. Each challenge they faced together strengthened the connection, proving that love was not just about moments of joy, but about standing together through uncertainty and struggle. They also began to reflect on the past, on the moments that had shaped them. Each shared story brought new understanding and compassion. They realized how much their experiences had prepared them to appreciate this connection, to value it not as a fleeting excitement, but as something enduring and meaningful. Friends and family noticed the change. He seemed lighter, more at ease with himself, more willing to show emotion. She seemed calmer, more confident, and happier than they had seen in a long time. Yet they remained private, careful to protect the fragile beginnings of something they both knew was precious. As the weeks passed, they grew more comfortable expressing their care. Small acts of kindness, thoughtful messages, and quiet support became routine. The depth of feeling they shared was no longer hidden, even if it was not loudly proclaimed. There was a quiet strength in this understanding, a confidence that they could rely on each other. They discovered joys in simple things: shared meals, walks in familiar neighborhoods, late-night conversations about nothing and everything. Every moment spent together added layers to their connection, each one reinforcing the realization that what they shared was rare, valuable, and worth nurturing. Yet with this growing closeness came awareness of vulnerability. Love, they both knew, came with risks. They had been hurt before and feared repeating the pain. But the choice to be together, to acknowledge feelings despite uncertainty, was a conscious decision to embrace vulnerability in the hope of building something lasting. One evening, as they watched the city lights flicker in the distance, they spoke of dreams and aspirations. Not grand or dramatic, but simple hopes for the future moments of shared happiness. Support during challenges and the possibility of building a life that included each other. And speaking of these things, they recognized that their bond was not accidental. It was a choice, nurtured through understanding, patience, and care. This period became a turning point. The moment when they both understood that love was not a fleeting feeling, but a series of choices. Each meeting, each conversation, each gesture reinforced the commitment to care, to support, and to grow together. The quiet realization that their lives had become intertwined in meaningful ways marked the beginning of a deeper chapter. They did not know what the future held. Life was uncertain, challenges were inevitable, and fear still lingered. But they had each other, and that presence was enough to face the unknown. It was in this shared strength, this mutual understanding, that their love began to truly take shape. And so, the story continued, moving beyond chance and casual encounters, toward a love that was intentional, real, and quietly extraordinary. The moment that changed, everything had arrived, and with it came a new awareness that true connection was not always loud, not always dramatic, but it could transform life in ways that mattered most. Life does not always go according to plan. Just as their connections seemed to grow stronger, unexpected challenges appeared, testing the bond they had built. It was not sudden or catastrophic, but persistent enough to create tension and uncertainty, misunderstandings, long days, and external pressures started to pull at the fragile threads of their relationship. For her, family matters required her attention once again. Responsibilities that she could not avoid demanded time, energy, and patience. She had to focus on things beyond her control, and it left her feeling stretched thin. She worried about neglecting the connection they had. Even as she struggled to keep up with obligations she could not postpone, he, on the other hand, faced his own challenges. Work became more demanding, deadlines pressed closer, and stress seemed to shadow every action. He wanted to be present, to support her. But there were times when he could only offer words from afar or brief moments that never felt enough. Frustration grew quietly, unspoken, but felt deeply. They tried to communicate, but words often failed. Misunderstandings crept in, small disagreements that had the power to fester. Both cared deeply, but both were vulnerable, carrying past hurts and fears that made them hesitant to fully express themselves. A simple misstep could trigger doubt and anxiety, leaving both feeling uncertain. One evening, they met after a particularly difficult day. Tired, distracted, and emotionally raw, the conversation quickly turned tense. Words meant to be gentle were misunderstood. Tone and intent became unclear. What began as a small disagreement grew into a moment of distance neither wanted, yet both struggled to navigate. It was the first real test of their connection. They parted that night feeling uneasy. Each went home, replaying the events, questioning themselves and the other. She wondered if she was asking too much, if her needs were overshadowing his. He wondered if he could handle the pressure, if he was enough to support her. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by doubts that both had tried to ignore until now. The next days were challenging. They continued to see each other, but an unspoken tension lingered. Their conversations were careful, deliberate, as though walking on thin ice. Each gesture, each word carried more weight than usual. The comfort they once found in each other now seemed fragile, and both were aware that the connection they cherished could be at risk. Yet, despite the difficulties, neither wanted to give up. Both realized that love was not just about ease and laughter, but about weathering storms together. They began to approach their challenges with patience, slowing down, listening more intently, and trying to understand the perspective of the other. One afternoon, they decided to meet in a quiet park, away from the pressures and distractions. They spoke openly about what had happened, about the misunderstandings and the tension that had built. There were tears, honest confessions, and moments of vulnerability that neither had anticipated. The conversation was not easy, but it was necessary. Through that dialogue, they began to rebuild trust. They acknowledged that challenges would always be part of life, but they also recognized the strength of their bond. They learned that love required effort, communication, and the willingness to be vulnerable, even when it was uncomfortable. It was a lesson both had needed, and the experience made their connection deeper, not weaker. As they navigated these trials, they also discovered small joys in each other. Moments of laughter, playful teasing, and quiet understanding reminded them why they had chosen to connect in the first place. The difficulties highlighted the importance of these simple pleasures, showing that even amid challenges, love could persist and grow. Family and friends continued to notice changes. They saw the resilience and commitment in both, the way they made time for each other despite the chaos of life. The pair were careful, not flaunting their connection, but the strength of their bond was evident in subtle ways: supportive gestures, patient listening, and the comfort they provided to one another. Over time, the tension eased, replaced by a stronger sense of partnership. They realized that challenges did not have to pull them apart. They could be opportunities to grow together, to learn about patience, empathy, and the value of presence. Each trial they faced became a building block, reinforcing the foundation of trust and understanding they had already begun to establish. Through this period, they also learned more about themselves. She discovered the depths of her resilience, how she could balance care for others with care for herself and her relationship. He discovered the importance of patience and emotional honesty, how expressing vulnerability could deepen connection rather than weaken it. These realizations enriched their bond, making it more authentic and sustainable. One evening, after a particularly long day, they sat together quietly. No words were needed. The comfort of simply being present, of knowing that despite all challenges they were still together, brought a profound sense of peace. In that moment, they both understood that love was not about perfection, but about persistence, understanding, and unwavering support. They began to intentionally nurture their connection, even in small ways. Texts of encouragement during busy days, checking in with each other, sharing moments of gratitude became part of their routine. These acts, though small, reinforced the commitment to each other and reminded them that love was as much about effort and care as it was about feeling. As the weeks passed, the challenges they had faced no longer seemed threatening, but instructive. They had learned how to navigate disagreements, how to communicate when emotions ran high, and how to maintain patience and compassion. Each step forward strengthened the sense of trust, making the bond between them more resilient and meaningful. The world outside continued as always, with its pressures, responsibilities, and uncertainties. Yet within their shared connection, they found stability, understanding, and a growing sense of hope. The love they nurtured was no longer fragile. It had been tested and had endured, proving its depth and potential. Even in moments of quiet reflection, they realized how far they had come. From casual encounters to deep, meaningful connection, they had grown together through patience, effort, and understanding. The challenges of life had not weakened them. They had taught them the true nature of love, the kind that is steady, supportive, and enduring. And so, of their story unfolded, showing that love was not only about joy and laughter, but also about facing difficulties together, learning from them, and emerging stronger. Theirs was a connection tested by life, yet resilient, growing, and real, one that would continue to deepen as they moved forward into an uncertain but hopeful future. Time moved on, and their love, once quiet and fragile, had grown into something steady and real. The challenges they had faced were no longer obstacles, but lessons that had shaped the way they understood each other. They had learned to communicate, to trust, and to value presence over perfection. Every small gesture, every shared moment, had built a foundation that could carry them through whatever life offered. They began to plan their days together more intentionally, not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with simple, thoughtful acts that made each day feel brighter. A morning coffee shared before work, a walk in the park in the evening, quiet conversations over meals. These small routines became anchors in their lives, reminders that love is built in everyday moments as much as in extraordinary ones. Friends and family noticed the change. They saw the way he looked at her with patience and care, and the way she smiled when he spoke, a genuine warmth that came from feeling safe and understood. Comments were made quietly, smiles exchanged, but neither felt the need to declare their love loudly. It was evident in the way they acted, in the way they prioritized each other, in the quiet confidence that had replaced earlier hesitation. One weekend, they decided to take a short trip together. It was not extravagant or luxurious, but it was a chance to experience something new side by side. They explored a small town, walked along narrow streets, shared meals at little cafes, and laughed at small mistakes along the way. The simplicity of the experience made it special. They realized that love did not need drama to be meaningful. It needed presence, understanding, and shared joy. During the trip, they found moments to speak openly about the future. Not plans set in stone, but hopes and possibilities. Dreams were shared quietly, dreams of supporting each other through life's uncertainties, of building a home filled with understanding and care, of facing challenges together rather than alone. There was no pressure, only the calm acknowledgement that their lives were intertwined in meaningful ways. They also reflected on their journey. From chance meetings to slow-growing closeness, to challenges that had tested their bond, they recognized how far they had come. The initial hesitations, the misunderstandings, the quiet doubts, they all seemed like necessary steps that led them to a place of confidence and connection. Their love had been shaped by patience and care, proving that true affection is nurtured over time, not rushed. Back home, life continued with its usual rhythms, but the difference was in their approach. Difficult days were easier because they faced them together. Achievements were sweeter because they celebrated them together. Ordinary moments were richer because they shared them fully. They had learned that love was not only about grand moments, but about living life alongside someone who cared deeply. They began to dream bigger. Not of material wealth or social recognition, but of life experiences they could share. Small adventures, quiet evenings, moments of laughter and support. They wanted to be present for each other's growth, to witness and encourage the other's hopes and aspirations. This shared vision created a new sense of purpose and deepened their connection. Occasionally, challenges still arose, as they always would. Work pressures, family responsibilities, and personal fears continued to exist. But they had built resilience. They communicated openly, supported each other patiently, and found solutions together. Disagreements no longer threatened their bond because they had learned to approach conflict with empathy and understanding. Their love had grown mature, steady, and real. They also began to inspire those around them. Friends saw the way they supported and cared for each other, how they balanced independence with partnership. Their story was shared quietly among family and friends, admired not for dramatic romance, but for its authenticity and steadiness. It became an example of what real love could look like: patient, caring, and present. One evening, as the sun set over the city, they sat together quietly. Neither spoke for a long while, but the comfort was profound. The journey they had taken, from strangers to companions, had brought them to this point of understanding and peace. The silence was full of trust, gratitude, and unspoken promises. It was a moment that captured everything they had built together. Over time, they continued to deepen their bond. Life remained unpredictable, but they had learned to navigate it together. Small routines, thoughtful gestures, shared laughter, and quiet support became the hallmarks of their relationship. They knew that love was not about perfection, but about choosing each other every day in small and meaningful ways. As the months passed, they reflected on the impact their connection had on their lives. Both felt more confident, more resilient, and more capable of facing challenges because they were together. They had found not only love, but partnership, friendship, and understanding. Their story, once a quiet beginning, had grown into something that inspired and encouraged those around them. The love that had started as chance meetings had become intentional, real, and enduring. They had faced obstacles, navigated misunderstandings, and grown through challenges. They had learned the value of patience, honesty, and presence. Most importantly, they had discovered that true love is not only about feeling, but about acting, choosing, and nurturing the bond through life's everyday moments. And so, their story reached a chapter that was both satisfying and inspiring. It was not marked by grand declarations or dramatic events, but by steady, genuine affection, and commitment. The love story everyone talked about was real because it reflected life itself, complex, challenging, yet filled with small, profound moments that made everything worthwhile. It was a reminder that true love is not always loud or immediate, but it is powerful, enduring, and unforgettable. Even after months of shared experiences and growing closeness, life had new lessons waiting for them. Part 6 of their journey began not with a grand event, but with quiet reflection. Both realized that love is a continuous process, not a destination. They had built trust, comfort, and deep understanding. Yet they knew they needed to keep nurturing their bond. Their days became more intertwined. Simple routines, like morning greetings and evening walks, grew into a rhythm that brought both joy and reassurance. Each interaction, no matter how small, was a reminder of their connection. It wasn't just about being together. It was about being present for each other in ways that mattered. One morning, he noticed she seemed unusually quiet. Her smiles were softer, and she moved with a kind of distant focus. Instead of asking immediately, he offered small gestures: a cup of coffee, a hand lightly on her shoulder, a gentle presence beside her. Slowly, she opened up, sharing worries that had weighed on her. Work pressures, family responsibilities, and a lingering fear of letting people down had made her anxious. He listened without interruption, offering reassurance not in grand words but through understanding and patience. The act of simply listening strengthened the bond even more. They also began exploring new experiences together. Not extravagant adventures, but little challenges that encouraged growth. Cooking new meals at home, trying a new hobby together, or taking a spontaneous short trip brought fresh energy to their routine. These shared experiences taught them patience, collaboration, and the simple pleasure of enjoying life with someone who truly understood them. Yet life continued to test them in unexpected ways. A sudden event at work required him to focus intensely for weeks, leaving her feeling distant and unsure. Misunderstandings began to arise, not out of malice, but from absence and assumption. Messages went unanswered longer than usual, and small frustrations grew into silent tension. Both felt the strain, aware that unspoken feelings could quietly erode what they had built. One evening, she confronted him gently about the distance she had been feeling. The conversation was difficult, emotional, but necessary. He listened carefully, acknowledging his absence and expressing his own challenges. They did not resolve everything immediately, but the act of addressing the issue openly and respectfully created a new level of understanding. They realized that love is not just about happy moments, but about facing difficulties together and communicating honestly after that conversation. They became more intentional in their interactions. Even during busy or stressful days, they made time for small gestures of car messages of encouragement, surprise notes, or a shared meal. These efforts, though minor, reminded them that love thrives in attention, presence, and consideration. During this period, they also reflected on their personal growth. She noticed her own resilience, the ways she could balance her responsibilities while maintaining care for the relationship. He recognized his ability to remain patient, to listen and support without needing immediate solutions. Both understood that love had helped them grow into stronger, more compassionate versions of themselves. They also began to dream together about the future in quiet, thoughtful ways. Not plans set in stone, but hopes for a life that included shared joy, mutual support, and continued growth. They imagined a life where challenges were met together, where successes were celebrated together, and where everyday moments were filled with presence and understanding. These visions strengthened their commitment and brought a sense of peace and purpose. Friends and family noticed a deeper maturity in their connection. The couple was no longer simply enjoying the novelty of affection, but showing evidence of a relationship built on patience, communication, and understanding. Their example quietly inspired those around them, demonstrating that real love is sustained by continuous effort and care, not just feelings or words. As months passed, they also learned to celebrate small victories together. Overcoming a stressful week, completing personal goals, or simply making time for each other despite busy schedules became moments of joy and gratitude. These celebrations reminded them that love is nurtured through attention to the little things. Not only through grand gestures, they encountered moments of doubt occasionally, as all couples do, but they had learned to navigate them with honesty. Instead of letting fear or assumption dominate, they approached each other with curiosity, empathy, and respect. This created a resilience in their bond that was more enduring than passion alone could provide. One evening, while sitting quietly under the stars, they spoke about their journey so far. They shared memories of the first meeting, the moments that had challenged them, and the ways they had supported each other. In recounting these experiences, they recognized the depth of their connection and the value of the trust they had cultivated. It was a moment of reflection that reinforced their appreciation for the journey. Not just the destination, they continued to embrace life's unpredictability with patience and unity. Challenges no longer felt overwhelming because they faced them as a team. Joys no longer felt fleeting because they celebrated them together. The understanding that they were partners in every sense gave them confidence and stability. Even ordinary days became meaningful. Grocery runs, routine errands, and casual conversations were infused with warmth and care. Each day together was a small building block, reinforcing the sense of partnership, intimacy, and shared responsibility. They realized that love is woven into these everyday actions, creating a tapestry that grows stronger over time. The love they shared became a source of inspiration, not because it was dramatic or extravagant, but because it was authentic and consistent. Their story, though private and quiet, began to influence the way they approached life and relationships around them. People noticed not just the affection, but the patience, effort, and understanding that sustained it. By the end of this period, they had reached a level of connection that was rare. They were not perfect, and life was not without challenges, but they had learned to navigate the complexities together. They had discovered that love is not only about feeling, but about continuous choice, care, and presence. The story of their love continued, unfolding in ways both quiet and profound. After months of building trust, understanding, and a deep connection, they reached a point where their bond was no longer defined by the initial excitement of discovery, but by the comfort, respect, and care that had grown steadily over time. Life, as it always does, continued to present challenges, opportunities, and moments that tested the strength of their relationship. It began with a simple morning. He noticed how she moved through the room, small details she never thought he would see, the way her hands lingered on a cup, the quiet focus in her eyes as she organized her day. These moments, ordinary to the world, were extraordinary to him. He saw in her a strength and grace that went beyond appearances, and he felt a profound sense of gratitude for her presence in his life. She, too, noticed the subtleties of his character, the way he approached challenges with patience, the quiet consideration in his words, the gentle attentiveness that made her feel understood and valued. It was not just about the grand gestures or dramatic moments of romance. It was about the small, consistent acts that built trust and security. These observations deepened her affection, not through sudden revelations, but through the steady accumulation of shared experience. They began to reflect on the journey that had brought them here. From their first chance encounter to the long conversations, shared challenges, and quiet victories. They recognized that their connection had been shaped by both circumstance and conscious choice. Each moment, each decision to be present and supportive, had contributed to a relationship that was both resilient and meaningful. One afternoon, they faced a situation that tested this resilience. A problem emerged in their personal or professional lives. Something neither could control that threatened to create distance. Instead of reacting with frustration or withdrawal, they approached the situation together. They communicated openly, shared their concerns, and strategized solutions, supporting each other without judgment or blame. The challenge, rather than weakening their bond, reinforced the strength of their partnership. Through these experiences, they discovered the importance of empathy. Understanding each other's perspectives, fears, and motivations became a central part of their relationship. They learned to listen not just to words but to emotions, to the pauses and hesitations that often carried more meaning than speech. This skill allowed them to navigate misunderstandings with care and compassion, reducing conflict and deepening trust. As their relationship matured, they also explored deeper emotional intimacy. They shared dreams, aspirations, and fears that had previously been hidden. Discussions of personal growth, values, and the kind of life they wanted to build together became common. These conversations were not always easy. They required vulnerability, courage, and honesty, but each one strengthened the foundation of their love. They also learned to celebrate each other's individuality. Each had personal goals and ambitions, and they encouraged the pursuit of these independently, as well as together. This balance of closeness and independence created a dynamic in which both felt supported and free, a relationship that was nurturing rather than suffocating. They found joy in each other's achievements and comfort in shared challenges. Over time, small everyday moments gained new significance. Cooking together, running errands, quiet evenings at home, or even a simple conversation over coffee became opportunities to connect and reinforce their bond. These ordinary activities were imbued with meaning because of the awareness, care, and intentionality they brought to them. They realized that love thrives not just in grand declarations, but in consistent, thoughtful engagement. There were still challenges. Life was unpredictable, and external pressures occasionally caused tension or anxiety. But they had developed the skills to face these moments constructively. Open communication, empathy, patience, and shared problem-solving became tools that allowed them to navigate difficulties without letting them damage the connection. Each resolved challenge reinforced confidence in the durability and depth of their love. They also embraced reflection and gratitude, regularly taking time to appreciate each other, acknowledge efforts, and celebrate moments of joy became a ritual that strengthened their emotional connection. These practices nurtured positive feelings, reduced misunderstandings, and enhanced overall satisfaction in the relationship. They recognized that love requires attention, mindfulness, and tension. As their connection deepened, they began to imagine the long-term possibilities of their relationship. They discussed the kind of life they wanted to build, shared visions of future experiences, explored values, priorities, and mutual expectations. These discussions were approached with care, avoiding pressure or rigid plans, but allowing for shared understanding and alignment. This stage of the relationship required emotional maturity, patience, and open-heartedness, which they both demonstrated consistently. They also continued to grow individually. Personal development, pursuit of passions, and self-reflection became part of the shared journey. They supported each other in these endeavors, recognizing that the strength of a relationship is enhanced when both partners are fulfilled and confident. This dual growth allowed their love to expand, creating a dynamic that was mutually enriching. Moments of intimacy and vulnerability continued to play a crucial role. Honest sharing of fears, past regrets, and hopes for the future built emotional depth and trust. They practiced empathy, validated each other's feelings, and responded with care and support. These moments reinforced the sense of safety and belonging that had been established early in the relationship and were critical to sustaining long-term connection. They also found ways to incorporate joy, humor, and lightheartedness into their lives. Shared laughter, playful teasing, and spontaneous adventures provided relief from stress and reinforced positive emotional bonds. They realized that maintaining a sense of fun and delight was as important as addressing challenges and building trust. Through all of this, they learned patience, understanding that growth, connection, and trust evolve over time allowed them to navigate slow progress and occasional setbacks without frustration. They respected each other's pace, acknowledged progress, and accepted imperfections. This approach created an environment where love could flourish authentically and the stayed. They maintained a balance between togetherness and individuality, recognizing the importance of personal space, autonomy, and self-expression. Encouraging each other to pursue interests, friendships, and goals outside the relationship reinforced respect and admiration. This equilibrium strengthened the partnership and prevented the relationship from becoming stifling or codependent. As seasons changed and months turned into years, their shared history deepened. Experiences of joy, challenge, growth, and shared learning created a rich tapestry of memories that reinforced their connection. Each milestone, both large and small, became a testament to the resilience, effort, and intentionality that characterized their love. They also contributed positively to their communities, using lessons learned from their relationship to guide interactions with friends, family, and colleagues. Their empathy, patience, and understanding inspired those around them. The authenticity of their bond demonstrated that meaningful relationships require consistent care and that love can positively influence the wider social environment. In quiet reflection, they recognized that the story of their love was not defined by dramatic events, but by the accumulation of small, intentional acts, mutual respect, and shared growth. They understood that real love is built slowly, nurtured carefully, and strengthened through challenges. Their relationship was a living example of this principle, demonstrating that authenticity, patience, and mutual support create enduring connections. They continued to cultivate gratitude, regularly acknowledging each other's contributions and expressing appreciation for shared experiences. This practice reinforced positive emotions, deepened emotional intimacy, and fostered a resilient and satisfying partnership. They realized that love is both an experience and a practice, requiring attention and effort over time. Through all stages, they maintained open communication. Discussions about feelings, expectations, and concerns were handled with respect, empathy, and honesty. This approach prevented misunderstandings from escalating, reinforced trust, and ensured that both partners felt valued and understood. They learned that effective communication is fundamental to long-term relational health. As the relationship matured, they also focused on shared values and vision for the future. By aligning priorities, discussing long-term goals, and supporting each other's growth, they created a framework for sustained partnership. This alignment fostered confidence, stability, and a sense of shared purpose, enhancing both emotional and practical aspects of their connection. The love they shared was resilient because it combined emotional depth, practical effort, and shared values. They knew that challenges would continue, that life is unpredictable. But their partnership provided a foundation of support, understanding, and trust.